Welcome to Radio Life Stories. Here, where stories come to life, we invite you to subscribe to our channel and become part of this exciting journey. Every story we share is an opportunity to reflect, be inspired, and perhaps see yourself in these authentic and touching tales. Today, we have a special story that will tug at your heartstrings. Subscribe now and discover this incredible narrative that just might transform your day.
The morning light filtered through the large windows of the Thompson house, reflecting off the polished, gleaming surfaces as I, Clara, prepared for another day of work. I woke up early as usual, even before the sun fully rose above the horizon. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen, one of the few things I genuinely appreciated in that home, which was not mine. With a deep sigh, I put on my uniform, a simple dress that couldn't compare to the elegant clothes of Laura and Emily. As I tidied up the living room, I heard laughter coming from upstairs. Emily and her friends always having fun, oblivious to the real world. "Look at how Clara dresses," Emily commented with a mocking tone. "She looks like she stepped out of a horror movie." Her words cut like a knife, but I forced myself not to react. I just kept cleaning, hearing their laughter echo. "Do you think she even knows what it's like to have a decent wardrobe?" Laura joined her daughter, laughing. "It must be hard to live such a simple life, right, Clara?" I didn't know whether to respond or just ignore it. I chose the latter, even though every word hurt deeply. With each passing day, I felt more like a shadow in that place, a spectator to the opulence surrounding me. The walls of the house were adorned with artwork and luxurious furniture, while I struggled to keep everything in order, never truly being noticed. It was as if I were living in an inverted fairy tale, where the magic was the wealth and I was the forgotten peasant. In a moment of despair, while polishing the dining table, I remembered my childhood. I grew up in a small apartment with my mother, who worked hard to put food on the table. Our dreams were simple: to have a comfortable place, a house full of laughter, and a better future. I dreamed of becoming someone important, but life led me to be a maid, a position that seemed increasingly unbearable. "Clara," Laura's voice interrupted my daydreaming. "You didn't clean under the table. Look how dirty it is." I swallowed hard, trying not to let the frustration show. "Sorry, ma'am. I'll make sure it's perfect." The automatic response came out as a whisper as I crouched down to correct my mistake, feeling Laura's eyes bore into me. "It's amazing how you can't keep things in order," she continued, the sarcasm evident. "Maybe you need more practice." With my face burning with shame, I stood up and hurried out of the room without looking back. As I passed through the door, I noticed David, the master of the house, standing in the adjacent room, watching the scene. His expression was one of concern, and for a brief moment our eyes met. There was something in his gaze that made me feel a little less invisible, as if he could see beyond the maid I was. But I quickly looked away, not wanting to be fooled by a glimmer of hope. I returned to my routine, but the humiliation still echoed in my mind. As I washed dishes in the kitchen, I couldn't stop the tears from slipping down my face. It was an endless cycle of devaluation and disdain, and I didn't know how much longer I could endure it. The dreams of a different life seemed so distant, almost as if I were trapped in a bubble that couldn't burst. "Clara, are you okay?" David appeared at the kitchen door, his tone gentle, in stark contrast to Laura's harshness. I quickly wiped away the tears, trying to force a smile. "Yes, sir. Just a bit tired." The truth was, I was exhausted from everything. The work, the cruel words, and most of all from feeling invisible. But for some reason, the concern in David's eyes made me think that maybe there was a way out, a way to break the chains that held me there. The day began like so many others at the Thompson house. The sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the luxurious furniture and ornamental details that seemed to scream ostentation. But for me, Clara, that light didn't bring warmth. It was just a reminder of the distance between my life and the life those walls sheltered. After a breakfast marked by Laura and Emily's disdainful comments, I found myself tidying the kitchen, trying to ignore the growing pain inside me. Look, the maid didn't even have time to fix herself up, Emily blurted out, laughing with her mother. Those words pierced me like knives. I knew my wrinkled uniform and messy bun were insignificant compared to what really mattered. But the humiliation was a constant companion. With trembling hands, I wiped away a tear that slid down my cheek. I couldn't afford to cry. Not here, not in the house that treated me like a shadow. I went to the bathroom, my silent refuge. I closed the door behind me and let the tears fall. The mirror reflected a tired woman and at the same time, a young girl full of dreams that seemed so distant. I am more than this, I whispered to myself as I tried to compose my expression. It was then that David entered the bathroom without knocking. He stood in the doorway with a look of concern that surprised me. Clara, are you okay? His voice was soft, almost a whisper. I'm just tired, Mr. Thompson, I replied, trying to hide the fragility in my voice. You don't need to call me Mr. You can call me David, he said, taking a step forward as if he wanted to close the distance between us. Can I make you a cup of coffee? It looks like you need it. I hesitated. How could I accept such a kind gesture from someone so above me? No, thank you. I have to get back to work. He seemed reluctant, but before he could insist, Laura entered, interrupting the moment. What's going on here? David, you shouldn't be helping the maid. Or are you thinking of giving her a day off? The sarcasm in her voice was unmistakable. Laura, I was just asking if Clara was okay, David replied, but there was a tone of defense in his voice that made me feel a little less invisible. Oh, of course. Because that's so important. Don't forget she's just an employee. There's no need to worry about her, Laura snapped, and her words were like a bucket of cold water. I shrank, feeling the shame wash over me. Sorry, I'll get back to work, I murmured, avoiding David's gaze as I left the bathroom. The hallway was silent, but inside the revolt was growing. Why did I allow myself to be treated this way? As I cleaned the library, a corner of the house that always fascinated me for its many books and refined decor, something caught my attention. It was a framed photo, slightly dusty, leaning on a shelf. The image showed David next to a woman I didn't recognize. She had a radiant smile and a gaze that exuded joy. I was intrigued. Who is she? I murmured to myself, examining the photo more closely. The woman seemed so alive, so full of stories. What had happened to her? What did David think about that memory? Clara. David's voice echoed through the library, making my heart race. Did you find something interesting? I quickly put the photo back in its place, afraid he would see the curiosity in my eyes. I was just organizing the books, sir. He approached, his eyes fixed on me. You can talk to me, you know? You don't have to hide anything. I know. It's just that. I don't want to bother you. David smiled, and for the first time, I saw a glimpse of sadness in his eyes. You're never a bother, Clara. Remember that. At that moment, I realized that despite the humiliations, there was a thread of hope intertwining between us. A connection that was beginning to blossom, even amidst the disdain and oppression that surrounded me. That night's dinner was tense. The table, adorned with silver cutlery and fine china, reflected the opulence of the Thompson family, but I could barely appreciate the beauty of the setting. As I served the dishes, I noticed Emily's disdainful looks, who never missed an opportunity to provoke me. Clara, you forgot my salad, Emily shouted with an arrogance that made me feel small. I swallowed hard, feeling the blood boil in my veins. What could I say? It wasn't the first time the young girl treated me with contempt, but at that moment, something inside me began to break. Sorry, Emily, I'll get it right away, I said, trying to keep my voice steady and my eyes down, as I walked away from the table. In the kitchen, I took a deep breath, trying to control the anger growing in my chest. I could hear the family's lively conversation in the background, but Laura, the matriarch's laughter stood out. It was a laugh that sounded like mockery, a reminder of how many times I had been the target of her criticism. I looked out the window, absorbed in thoughts, when a shadow approached. Clara? It was David, my boss. His presence was always a relief amidst the tension I felt. Are you okay? Part of me wanted to open up, to talk about the daily humiliations, about how the arrogance of his wife and daughter was slowly destroying me. But another part, more cautious, made me hesitate. I'm fine, David. Just a little tired, I guess. He observed me as if trying to read my emotions. Then he did something unexpected. He approached and, in a gentle gesture, offered me a cup of coffee. You don't have to endure everything alone, Clara. Sometimes a little coffee can help, right? Thank you, David. I smiled timidly, feeling a warmth in my chest. But before I could drink the coffee, the kitchen door burst open and Laura walked in. What's going on here? Her voice was cutting and I shrank. Clara, you're always messing up. Can't you do anything right? I felt the humiliation wash over me like a wave. I looked at David, but he seemed uncomfortable, which gave me a small hope. Mom, leave her alone. David's voice was firm, and I was surprised to notice that he was defending me. She's doing her job and doesn't need your provocations. Laura frowned, clearly displeased. You're taking her side? The incredulity in her voice was palpable. It's not about taking sides, Laura. It's about treating people with respect. You should know that. The tension in the room increased and I was paralyzed, not knowing what to do. David was putting himself in a risky position, and I felt that if he continued, he could become a target too. I need to get back to the dinner, I murmured, interrupting the confrontation. I didn't want him to risk more for my sake. Clara, wait. David tried to call me, but I had already left the kitchen. I returned to the table, where the atmosphere was heavy and filled with awkward silences. Emily looked at me with a malicious smile as if waiting for me to make another mistake. Look, everyone, the maid is back. Her tone was sarcastic and I felt my face heat up. Emily, that's enough. David's authoritative voice silenced the table. The tension in the air was thick, almost palpable. I didn't want to be the target anymore. But the courage that had awakened in me in that kitchen began to take shape. As soon as I finished serving the remaining dishes, I decided I wouldn't let those provocations affect me. I may be a maid, but that doesn't mean I'm less than any of you. My voice was firmer than I expected, and David gave me a look of surprise and approval. Dinner continued, but the atmosphere had changed. I noticed that David was more present, observing every move, every interaction. What had once seemed like an endless cycle of humiliations was now beginning to turn into something different. A new kind of recognition, not just of my presence but of my dignity. As I left the room after dinner, Laura and Emily's conversation echoed in my ears. They talked about a luxurious trip, not considering that I might have feelings about it. Their indifference cut me, but something inside me was changing. I wasn't just a maid. I was Clara, a woman with dreams and rights. And even if the road was long, I was willing to fight for my dignity. The sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, reflecting off the stainless steel utensils and creating a shine that made me feel a little better amidst the exhausting routine. I was preparing breakfast for the Thompson family, but my mind was far from there. I was thinking of David, who, despite being surrounded by his wife and daughter's arrogance, seemed to have a glimmer of empathy in his eyes. Since he sought me out in the library after I found that old photo, something inside me had changed. I didn't know exactly what it was, but there was a sense of hope that I hadn't felt in a long time. Clara, why are you so slow today? Laura's voice cut through my daydream like a knife. These toasts won't burn themselves, you know, right? Sorry, Mrs. Thompson. I'm doing my best, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, even though the words came out with a tremor. Your best is never enough, is it? Laura rolled her eyes, and I felt the humiliation spread through my body. But instead of letting it get me down, I remembered the look David gave me when he saw me at that dinner, and how he seemed to understand what I was going through. That gave me the courage I needed. As soon as I finished serving breakfast, I decided it was time to talk to David again. He was in the office, and I hesitated for a moment before knocking on the door. "May I come in?" I asked, trying to hide my nervousness. "Of course, Clara. Come in." His voice was welcoming and I entered, closing the door gently behind me. "I just wanted to... Well, I was thinking about that day in the library. About your sister," I said, feeling my heart race. "You never told me much about her." David looked at me with an expression that mixed longing and pain. "She disappeared years ago. We never knew what happened. I miss her every day. If you need someone to talk to..." I started, but he interrupted me. "Actually, I do. Clara, you're an incredible person. I admire your strength." He leaned forward slightly as if he wanted to connect more. "The way you face all this, I wish I could help you somehow. I just want to be treated like a person, David, not like an invisible maid," I said, feeling the tears welling up in my eyes. "Sometimes it feels like I'm only here to serve, and that hurts." "You're not invisible to me," he stated, and I could feel the sincerity in his words. "I promise I'll do what I can to change that." Before I could respond, I heard laughter and loud voices coming from the living room. Laura and Emily were organizing a party at home, and the tension in the air was palpable. "Oh no, it won't be another humiliation," I thought to myself. "Sorry, David. I think I need to get back," I said, trying to pull myself together. "Clara, wait. Let's talk more later, okay?" He seemed genuinely concerned, and I nodded, even though my heart was heavy. As the day passed, the party approached and I could barely focus on my tasks. Laura was in her queen of the house mode, giving orders to everyone as if they were her subjects. What bothered me the most was how she talked about me as if I were an object, not a person. "Clara, can you get more ice? I don't want the guests to be without drinks," she said without even looking at me. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, but a part of me wanted to scream. I wished David were there to support me, but he was caught up in his obligations, and I felt more alone by the minute. During the party, while serving the guests, I noticed David was in a conversation with a friend. His gaze shifted to me, and I tried to offer a smile, but all I managed was a slight nod. He seemed so distant, and the feeling of being invisible came back with a vengeance. "Look who's here, the maid. I hope you made something tasty for us," Emily mocked, surrounded by her friends who laughed in unison. I felt my face heat up, and the urge to disappear intensified. "Don't worry, Emily. I'll make sure everything is perfect for you and your friends," I replied, trying to keep my dignity, but the irritation was pulsing in my veins. The party continued, and I found myself serving dishes and drinks, doing the best I could, but it was as if I were on a stage, and all the attention was anywhere but on me. David was there, but his presence didn't seem enough to dissipate the weight of those humiliations. That night, as I washed the dishes, frustration overwhelmed me. I didn't know how much more I could take. The atmosphere at the Thompson house was tense. The anticipation of the party hung in the air like a thick fog. I knew that once again, I would be treated like a ghost, an invisible presence in the glamorous life of that family. As I finished the last details in the living room, I heard giggles and malicious comments from Laura and Emily, who were enjoying themselves in their luxurious outfits, despising my existence. "Look at the maid in those worn-out clothes," Emily said, her voice full of disdain. My heart tightened, but I just lowered my head, trying to ignore the pain. It was a constant struggle not to let it affect me. When the party started, the room filled with guests, and I moved among them, serving drinks and snacks. There was a sparkle in everyone's eyes, but not mine. What I felt was a mix of sadness and indignation. Every smile I received was just another mask, a way to hide the true essence of that family. Every glance they averted from me made me feel like an object, a house tool. "Clara, could you bring more champagne, please?" Laura's voice called me, but it was as if I wasn't worthy of a response. Reluctantly, I went to the kitchen. As I filled the glass, I heard a murmur coming from the living room. "She's not even good at this," Emily said, laughing with a friend. My hand trembled as I held the bottle and almost spilled the liquid. I took a deep breath. I couldn't let this affect me. But the truth was I was tired. Tired of being treated like nobody. Deep down, I knew the party was just another way for the family to show off. With every laugh they shared, I felt more isolated. That's when I decided it was time to take action. I couldn't stand the humiliations any longer. With my heart racing, I thought about quitting. The idea brought me a mix of freedom and fear. How would I do that? What if I couldn't find another job? But the life I was living wasn't life. It was a subtle nightmare that I could no longer endure. As my thoughts swirled, David entered the kitchen, his expression showing evident concern, though I didn't know what it was about. He looked me in the eye, and for a moment I almost felt like he could see beyond what I was to the family. "Clara, are you okay?" he asked. The sincerity in his voice was a balm amidst the chaos. "I'm just tired," I replied, trying to hide the storm brewing in my chest. "The party seems to be going well." "It is, but what about you? Shouldn't you be having fun too?" he insisted. "Having fun?" I laughed without humor. "I'm just the maid, David. I was never invited to this party." He seemed bothered by my response. "You're not just that, Clara. I see you. And I feel like you need to stay." Those words touched my heart, but the pain from the humiliations was still fresh. "I don't know if I can stay here, David. I can't take the contempt anymore." At that moment, a phone call interrupted our conversation. David answered quickly, and as he heard the voice on the other end, his face changed completely. The expression that had been one of concern now turned into a mix of shock and sadness. He hung up and the tension increased.
"Sorry, Clara.
I have to take care of something urgent. But please don't think about quitting. You're more important than you realize." Before I could respond, he left in a hurry. I looked at the door he had left through, feeling a mix of confusion and hope. The party continued, and I knew my place there was only to serve. But for the first time someone had seen me, and that sparked a small flame inside me. Even so, the idea of quitting still lingered in my mind, wondering if I would have the courage to take that step. The loud music and laughter echoed through the Thompson house as I organized the towels on the dining table. The smell of delicious food filled the air, but I could barely take in the aroma. My heart was racing. The party was an opportunity to show everyone that I wasn't just a maid but a woman with dreams and a story that deserved to be heard. However, reality was harsh and cold, and I knew that once again, I would be invisible to the family that hired me. As I set the table, I saw David in a corner of the room, laughing with some friends. He seemed so at ease, so distant from the pressure I felt. A tightness in my chest almost made me want to give up on everything. Then, an unexpected guest entered the room. He seemed a bit out of place, as if he were there by chance. His presence was imposing, and he quickly approached David with a strong hug. "David, I finally found you." "Alex, what are you doing here?" David replied, surprised and excited. "I brought some news and I thought you'd want to hear it," Alex said with a sparkle in his eyes. My curiosity was immediate. What news could be so important? With my heart racing, I discreetly moved closer, trying to hear the conversation. "It's about your sister," Alex whispered, making my stomach churn. "I discovered some things you need to know. The truth is more complicated than you think." His words cut through me like a knife. David's sister? I had no idea that this could be related to me. I remembered the photo I had found in the library, the woman with a sad smile and a gaze that was familiar to me. A shiver ran down my spine, and I wondered if there was a connection. David, noticing my curious look, gestured for me to come closer. Clara, come here. Alex has some news that might interest you. I hesitated, but something inside me forced me to move forward. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Alex looked at me with a recognition expression. Clara, do you know who you are, right? He turned to David. She has no idea what the family hid. Clara's more than a maid. She's the heir everyone thought had disappeared. The words echoed in my mind. The heir? Me? I was just a woman struggling to survive, without dreams, without hopes. But the truth was beginning to reveal itself, and I needed to know more. What do you mean by that? I asked, my heart pounding. You're David's sister, Clara, Alex said, his voice firm. The family you thought had left behind didn't disappear. They did it to protect you, to prevent you from being harmed. The world around me seemed to crumble, and I could barely process the information. David looked at me with a mix of disbelief and concern. It's true, Clara. I only found out about your existence recently, and everything you went through. I'm so sorry. Before I could digest everything, anger and pain began to bubble inside me. I looked at Laura and Emily, who were watching the scene with expressions of shock and disdain. You underestimated me, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. You treated me as if I were invisible, as if I had no value. But I am much more than a maid. The room fell silent and all eyes turned to me. I am Clara, and I am the heir you tried to keep secret. I am part of this family, and your humiliations will no longer define me. Laura opened her mouth, but no words came out. Emily seemed paralyzed. The tension in the air was palpable, and I felt the pieces of the puzzle finally fitting together. With my head held high, I had turned fear into strength. David approached, placing a hand on my shoulder as if he wanted to support me. Clara, this is just the beginning, he said, his voice firm. We will face this together. His gaze gave me the courage I needed, and I knew that no matter what happened from that moment on, I was no longer alone.
And so we've reached the end of another episode of Radio Life Stories. I hope this story touched you in some way, just as it touched all of us here. Before we go, I'd like to leave a few questions hanging in the air. What did this story awaken in you? How does it connect with your own journey? Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. We're curious to know how this story resonated in your life. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, click the subscribe button so you don't miss any of these inspiring stories. See you in the next episode, where we'll continue to explore the depths of the life stories that connect and transform us. Until then,